Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In the last episode we did paint a lot of components. They are now dry, so we can go ahead and whack all those bits back onto the pan. So I've just cleaned and inspected these grease seals for the suspension arms on the front here, and they're in really good condition. There's nothing wrong with them, so I can actually go ahead, refit those, which means then I can actually refit the arms. So I've got some new rubber boots to fit on these ball joints. I am going to pop a bit of grease in there. This is moly grease or lithium based grease. So these boots come with these really annoying clips, which is like a spring. And what I do is I just get it over the boot and I get it started, and then I just hook underneath with a picky tool and just pull it round to install it. Be careful when doing this, because obviously it is a hooky tool, and if you pierce the boot it kind of defeats the object. You can use a small screwdriver as well. So at the front here, I've refitted the suspension arms both sides. Just a word of advice, when you do, just before you do this grub screw up there, just push this completely home, look down the hole, just make sure there's a dimple for the grub screw to align with, and then just do it up and do the lock nut up. What I've also done is I've just refitted the grease nipples on both sides. I've given them a good clean. Just don't over tighten them because these do cross thread really easily. They're like a tapered thread, you see, so just nip them up and then a little bit more with the spanner. That's all it needs. And at the back here, I've just refitted that gearbox cradle with the new gearbox mounts. And also I'm installing this part where it bolts onto the spring plate on the axle, and this is the anti-roll bar bracket or Z-bar bracket, and the bump stop there, so that's all nicely bolted up. So when you are refitting these rear axles, just make sure it aligns, in my case, to the original factory line. It's very difficult to see there. There's a little mark on that spring plate, and there's also a mark here on that casting, so just make sure those two line up. And if you previously marked it with Tipex or Scribe Align to do some work, you know, like replace the bushes or lower it, just make sure those lines actually meet up again. So these are the rear hub seal carriers, and I've just removed the seals that sit inside here using a seal pulling tool. One thing to note is that if you do use a tool like this, they're very sharp, they're very scratchy, and there is a bottom and the top side, so make sure you lever it only on the top side. So if you do make any scratches or marks, you're not going to affect the operation of the oil seal. So if you do decide to change these seals for whatever reason, these little carriers here have to be cleaned up really, really well. In fact, there's actually a little hole here, you can barely see it, it's full of chod. But the hole's actually here, and it runs through this casting to here, and this is where the backing plate sits. If there is ever a problem with this oil seal, the oil will leak out here and come out the hole and out the backing plate. So the reason that this is designed to come out of the backing plate is actually away from the brake shoes to risk contamination and risk losing your brakes if they get covered in oil. What I'll also be doing is just lightly sanding this face here, just so I know it's nice and true and clean. So what I've done is I've given these a good old scrub up, just using some thinners to degrease them. I've made sure that this hole here on both sides is nice and clear. Then what I've done is I've just refaced this surface using a 400 sanding disc, nice and flat, and just rubbed it until that face is nice and flat like that. And then I've gone ahead and refitted the oil seal there, just a tiny smear of grease. Got it started with my fingers and then just drifted it home. So normally when fitting these types of seals, you'd use a seal fitting tool, which is like an aluminium disc with a kind of handle that goes in there so you can tap it down. I mean, my preferred method is to actually use that disc and put it in a vise and then just slowly do it up so it's inserted correctly. I don't really like drifting seals in because I do think that you could damage them if you're not careful. I don't actually have that tool. I did actually use a socket and a metal disc. I'll explain a bit more about this later and where I got it from. It might actually shock you. So I'm just refitting the hub seal carriers along with a hub seal kit. I just thought I'd mention a couple of things. First up is the paper gasket. I tend to fit these dry, but in the past I have actually put a smear of sealant around the edge, a real fine smear of sealant. You can do that if you want. That just sits up there and that gets a mating face on the back there, gets bolted up like that. Also inside here, you do have a race that sits inside. It has a concave part here. That section there actually lines up with the rubber seal that's on the shaft, so make sure you get that the right way around. If you do decide to fit this first and then put this over the top, you may not know if that is actually aligned correctly on the seal or is it folded the lip over. A neat trick here is actually just to get the race and install that first. Just pop it in like that and whack that on as one unit. So that's a bit more done on the Beetle chassis and it's finally coming along. I would like to fit the front wheel spindles, but unfortunately they are still actually bolted to the front wheels along with the steering gear, so I've got to get those stripped down and painted, but I'll do that another time. I think what we'll do now is we'll get on a bit more with the body. I just want to explain quickly about the seal fitting device that I use. I use a socket and a disc, but unfortunately I don't have the correct tools to fit these seals, and I needed a disc that was the correct size for this seal just to drift it home into the carrier, and the answer was pretty simple. So I didn't have the right tool, but I did have the old doorknob off the garage door, and inside that doorknob was actually the correct size disc for fitting the seal. Absolutely crazy. So I have actually made a start stripping the paint off the roof, but that's not what I'm going to be doing today. I really will need to look at the seal holding strips that go along the front. So on these old Beetles, they have a strip of steel with a return edge, and that's designed to hold a rubber seal, and that goes pretty much all the way around the valance, up the sides, and then across the scuttle panel. So on the near side here, you can see that this strip of steel is actually quite rusty in areas. In fact, the bottom part of it, where it's spot welded on, has actually pretty much disappeared in some places. I was lucky enough to actually be able to order replacement strips here from the UK. So something like this here, where it is rotty, there's nothing much I can do apart from replace it. The strip around the front edge and along the driver's side actually looks pretty good. I'm not 100% certain. What I'll do is I'll clean these areas up to see if they need replacing or not, and if they do, I'll whack a new one on. And at the back, pretty much the same thing. They have the strips going down and around the rear valance, and at the bottom of the rear valance here you can see that it's totally rotted away, so this strip here will need to be replaced. So if you're not worried about original looks, what you can do is you can remove this strip completely and fit something called a Mexican seal, which is just a generic seal that sits on the underside of the bonnet and then closes down here. If you want that original look though, the only way to go is to repair or replace these strips. So I've just used the angle grinder with a wire wheel attachment just to take the paint off these strips to really have a look. And yeah, this one here is actually really good, but it's got to come off. As there's rust here, you can see that there's a hole here, and I've got a sneaking suspicion the rust doesn't stop there, it's actually underneath the strip. So unfortunately, that's got to come off, and we'll put a new strip here. And on the front valance, it's pretty much the same thing. The actual strip itself is in pretty good condition, and it's slightly rusty at the bottom, but I don't know, something's telling me that there's rust underneath this strip, so yeah, that's got to come off. And without even taking the paint off this one, it is rotten, so it's got to come off as well. So that's the old strips removed all the way around. What I'm going to do now is just going to go around with a flat wheel just to take off these old spot welds and clean up some of this rust. So we've just cleaned up the area, sprayed a bit of zinc on there. The zinc will sit underneath the strip. This strip here, I've just gone ahead and drilled holes in there as I'll be plug welding it. Originally that was spot welded, but I'll be plug welding it. I'm going to start with this one at the front here, as this is the most awkward one. As you can see, it's got quite a bend there. Normally use the heat from the welds to manipulate this strip into position, and failing that I'm just going to use my gas torch just to give it that extra heat, just to bend it round. So what I've been doing is just plug welding that strip on and then heating the area next to it and just manually bending it just to follow this contour. One thing I did realise when I was welding this in, just how thin the material is on this strip, and I had to wind the welder right the way down to stop me blowing holes all the way around on those plug welds. Any little areas that I'm not quite happy with, I can easily straighten out afterwards, but to be honest, it only needs a little bit of tweaking here and there, and I wasn't really expecting anything more than this kind of finish. I mean, let's face it, it holds a rubber seal on. So I'm going to continue removing this scuzzy paint off this valance, and you guys do whatever you do while you're not watching my videos. I'll see you next time. Cheers!